Finally got the part in from ProCharger. Let's do some unboxing and see exactly if this matches what needs to go on the car. So we're on the phone for about half an hour making sure it's the right part, the right car, the right setup. So let's see what it looks like compared to what's on the car. Alright, so right off the bat I see the alternator standoff bracket, which is good. The second bracket right here, and there's the overflow and the inlet. So it looks like the right one. I did not know it had a drain hole at the bottom. So let's compare that to what's on the car. See if I can get my GoPro in close. So looking at the one on the car, it's the inlet, overflow, standoff bracket right here. The bracket right there that mounts to the manifold or top of the block. And does have a plug at the bottom, so it's a little bit more complicated than I thought it would be, but I think we can take care of that. So now that we got the new one in, it's time to get the old one off. I didn't want to take it off until this came in, just in case something comes up and I got to move the car. Safety first, I got to take my watch and my ring off. Don't want anything to happen. It's a 17 mil right here to get this bolt off where my catch can is. Do have power tools, but I don't want to mess anything up with all the torque that those put out, so I'll use the old school stuff. And this one I think is that's a deep well, so I'm gonna have to go in the trailer and get my deep well tools. Alright, that's deep well tools. That is a deep well 15 millimeter. So I'm going to just get everything loose right now. I'm not going to start pulling everything off until get everything loose, and since I'm going to be messing with alternator bolts, I'm going to disconnect the battery in the trunk. Seven millimeter for the coolant inlet. 1/4 inch drive makes it a lot easier than trying to use a flat tip or a crouch tip screwdriver. And this is where I had problems before too. This was dry rotted, and as fluid was coming in there, it was leaking right here at this elbow. So I actually cut all the dry rotted stuff off, and left the hose because the hose was still good after that. I just cut the dry rotted stuff off, moved the hose forward a little bit, and that solved that problem. But evidently that wasn't the only problem I was having. Let me get some shop towels just in case. Of course, it's slippery. It's a little harder to get off. I don't want to mess the hose up anymore. Try to pry it off with a flat tip, but I don't want to mess up this brass fitting. It's always the jobs that you think are going to be quick that seem to take the longest. This happened before. All the coolant kind of gets gunked in right there and makes its own seal, which is good when you're concerned about leaking. But when you got to replace the part, it makes it a little bit more complicated. And there's a lip on end of this fitting that helps with concealing all the leaking fluid. Helps the hose stay on. It's like a flare. It's actually a 2-stage flare. It's pretty cool. But still got to get that off anyway to transfer it to the new tank. So we have to figure that out. Of course, don't remove these caps if it's hot. This car hasn't been running in days, so it should be fine. Never take your radiator cap off when the car has been running. I don't know if they put some kind of Loctite in here or some sealant, but it might be better to try to get this off while it's still mounted to the car, because I don't have a vise, and even if I did, I don't want to mess this up too bad, because I might be able to get it welded and fixed later on. That way I have a spare tank. Even though it only took, from the time I ordered it Friday to get here on Monday, which should have been Sunday, from ProCharger. It's pretty good. But I like to have one on standby in case somebody else has the problem, and they can borrow it or use it or buy it or whatever. So get some wrenches for those fittings. This one is going to be a little bit more complicated. So let's try to get this one off first. And then you run into the problem: is it metric or is it SAE? So of course I got the SAE stuff, and I need to get the metric. Which I should have known. Everything seems to be going to metric. All helicopter mechanic stuff, everything was SAE. Nothing was in millimeter on the helicopters I worked on. Alright, so that's a 12 mil. Let's try the 12 mil. This is the drain line. That's why it's no end to it. That goes behind the radiator or best place you can route it so it doesn't drip or leak on your alternator or anything else that's going to heat it up, your headers or anything. So that's the drain line. That's going to get transferred to the new one. Let's see if this one is going to be the same or not. Of course it isn't. Try the 13. This one's a little bit more complicated because it's not really a spot to grip it and spin it at the same time, and there's definitely some fluid in there. I mean, some sealant that you can see breaking up to keep that in place. So it just tells me I'm gonna have to put some Loctite or something on there to keep that in place after I transfer it over to the new one. Such an awkward angle. Alright, we got it. Now I have to do the same thing to get it back on and get it tight. So that's the inlet fitting. So that's going to get transferred over. Alright, before I mess with anything else, I'm going to go disconnect the battery. Okay, here we are at the back of the car. For those who didn't know, I wanted to make sure I got this part in the video because I know all car guys aren't gearheads. So the battery for the Challengers, Chargers, a lot of these newer cars are located in the trunk. This is a 2015 Dodge Challenger. Our battery is located in the trunk on the passenger side underneath the floorboards. In my case, I had to remove a lot of unicorns and props and some other carpeting, so that for some people who have sound systems and speaker boxes, it becomes a hassle when you got to move a lot of stuff to get it out of the way to get to your battery, especially if you do indoor car shows and you have to disconnect your battery every time. So the battery is located right here. Positive terminal is closer toward the front of the car. Negative terminal is toward the back of the car. So we're going to disconnect the negative terminal, and that should kill all the power that we need to work on the car when it comes to messing around with the alternator. So it should be a 10mm nut on your terminal. You always want to do negative first so you don't arc anything, and that's also why I took my rings and watches off too, because that could cause a problem if you arc. So 10mm wrench. If you want to be really cautious, you can use an adjustable insulated wrench, that's fine. But if you're removing a negative first, you should be good. And you just wiggle it off. And now our negative battery terminal is disconnected. It's off the post, tucked in, because as you move around with the car, if you just leave it up there, it could wiggle back toward the post and touch the post and arc while you're working on something, and that can cause a problem. So you always want to tuck that all the way down in so it can't make its way back to the post. Alright, so I had to use the old wrench on a wrench trick to try to break the torque on this, because between the alternator, the fuse box, the ABS, I just didn't have enough room to get any leverage on this thing. So put a ratchet in a 15 mil socket on it. I put another wrench on the end of this thing to try to get a little bit more leverage, and finally broke the torque on it. You know, when it takes so long to break the torque on something, you second guess yourself and you start to think it's reverse threads and everything else, and you might be doing more harm than good. That's about where I was, so I didn't want to get that on film, on video. So it's got the torque broke on that one. That's the bolt that goes through the bracket on the arm to the alternator. So we should be almost done getting everything loosened up before it comes off. Just like every bolt, when you think it's loose and you go to hand loosen it, it's not quite as loose as you thought. So no space in there. It's almost there. Oh, that's a long bolt. How in the world? That's the alternator mounting bolt. It mounts the alternator to the block that this thing is on. That's why it's so long. Makes sense. Man, there's just no space down in here. Whew. You know, it's tough when the hair comes out of sport mode. Gotta find a sweet spot for the bolt between the ABS lines and the rest of the brackets to maneuver to be able to get this thing all the way out. Oh, no, I don't. I really don't. Because looking at the new one, it's horseshoed, it's not captive. So I don't have to put it all the way out. Now I know. Never worked on a Pro Charger stuff before, so I should probably pay more attention to. Thank you, Pro Charger. Man. Wish this one was that way, because this whole stud is coming out of the block. It always makes me nervous. Alright, it should be able to lift up, and I should be able to get to the holes at the bottom. There it is. So there's a worm gear clamp on that. Oh man, and that hose is dry rotted too, so I'm gonna have to be careful pulling that clamp off. And there still is fluid in here, so that's good and bad. So I'm gonna get a drip pan underneath here, some towels, a lot of towels. Put the cap back on, turn it upside down. Nope, that's not gonna work either because the drain holes. So I'm gonna have to just angle it. Try not to waste all the fluid down on the engine block. And get it off of there, so figure that out. Alright, so instead of putting the fittings back on, this one is high enough to where I don't think I have to worry about it. Just take this one off, and I'm going to try to squeeze the clamp that's got the coolant in it at the bottom closed, and hopefully that'll give me enough to not lose a bunch of coolant all over the place. Might have to remove this ABS cover. Just to try to pinch it off so that way a bunch of fluid doesn't come out residually. And I'm going to cover my alternator just in case. Now hopefully that same 7mm 1/4 inch drive fits on this worm gear clamp. It makes life easier so I don't have to search for another one. Of course it doesn't. Let's see. It's an 8mm on the bottom worm gear clamp. Really don't want this to leak into my alternator. from a different area. Alright, clamp is getting loose. Remember, I clamped off the fluid that's in the hose, but there still is coolant in the tank, not much. As a matter of fact, I think I have a differential pump I can probably use to get that out of there. Let's see if I can find that. Alright, so this is my fluid pump I'm going to try. If I can get this in here, I can probably pump the rest of that fluid out and salvage it and put it back in there. So let's see if that works. Alright, well, I'm not going to salvage it because I don't want to mess up any of my car wash buckets, so I'll make it work the way it is. I have other coolant, so I really don't need to salvage anything. So let's see if this works as advertised. Oh, doesn't look like it's long enough. Not long enough because of this right here. I have to see if I can find the other one I had that doesn't have that on there, or if I can remove this one. That works. So now I shouldn't make as big of a mess as I thought I was going to. And if I had an air compressor, I'd probably get the fluid transfer apparatus that works on air. And probably would have been done in 2 minutes because it's not that much fluid in here. But this isn't a shop; it's just a garage, and these are just things that I have laying around. You got to use what you got to get the job done. that's it. Not too bad. Not too bad. So try to wiggle that worm gear clamp back. Get that hose off the bottom. That hose is dry rotted too. My flat tip. Use it to pry that clamp off that dry rotted section. I'm probably going to trim that hose and get that dry rotted part off so we won't have any problems in the future, just like we did the top side. She comes. Not too much fluid leaking because of the clamp. So I'll stick some of the towel in there. Clamp is tight. Transfer some fittings over. Try to get the new one in. There we go. So that's that. Reverse the process, put the new one in. Okay, so I cut off the dry rotted crappy piece of hose that was on the end of the worm gear clamp. Just cut it with a knife. It was pretty bad. I kind of want to cut another 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch off because it's just that bad and it's dry rotting and it's still breaking. But I don't want to cut too much off and then it not reach where I need it to reach, but probably could do with another 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch off, so I'll just go ahead and do it. Yeah, that wasn't gonna last long. That was already breaking. So we'll leave it like that. Trim it up a little bit. Make it flush. I already transferred most of the fittings over to the new tank. The bottom was a 22 millimeter wrench. Had to love tap it a little bit to get it to break some of that Loctite on the bottom, or corrosion. I don't even think it was Loctite. So we got that off, got the new stuff transferred over, and this is what it looks like. This is the new tank. So now I want to go in, plug all the hoses up, top off the fluids, crank it up, and we should be good to go by this weekend. Working on the bottom alternator bolt right now. It's really in a bad spot, like I said before. Got my ABS brake lines right there, coil pack cover right here, oil dipstick right here, fuse box right here. It's just a really tight space. Even with a ratchet and a wrench it would be tight, but managed to get the socket back on there. Did the bottom coolant line already. Mounted it up to the block. So just tightening it up. don't know if I'm gonna monster torque it the way it was when I pulled it off, because it's just a mounting bolt to the alternator. So it's got 3 other ones. Doesn't need to be super tight like it was getting off. So that's on there. Had to move around the bottom coolant line just to get it around the main coolant line so it can mount up correctly. And look like I'm gonna have to spin this one too. I don't like spinning loose, but it's a quarter turn to get it all lined up. I believe this was the 7mm 1/4-inch drive. Yeah, 7. Alright, so next is the drain line. Probably could have took the hose off to make it a lot easier, but just didn't do it. All that new paint on here is getting in the way. Probably work better if I wasn't tired and hungry, but I really want to get this done and not have to worry about this headache anymore. It is lunchtime. It was lunchtime a few hours ago. Like I said, it's always the jobs you think that'll be quick that winds up taking you the longest. Threads don't want to catch. Alright, you got the coolant. It's got to be Mopar brand. At least that's what they taught me when I worked at the dealership. My hands aren't that steady, so I use a funnel just in case. Not that the car isn't filthy already. Pour a little bit and check to see if I see anything dripping. I don't want to fill it all the way up and then it all leaks out because of something I may have forgotten. And you should know what your coolant looks like. All coolants aren't the same. They all aren't the same color. So when you do check it, you know what it's supposed to look like in case you have any kind of head gasket leakage and you get oil or anything in your coolant. You know what it's supposed to look like. If you know what it's supposed to look like, then you know if you have an issue when you do see it when you open the cap or when you drain anything. Alright, we're topped off. I don't see any leaking. Put the cap back on and find where I put my key. Reconnect the battery in the back and then crank it up and see if we're good to go. Tightened up the catch can already, so that's good to go. Double checked everything, made sure it was tight. Everything capped off. So now we just gotta reconnect our negative terminal in the trunk. And then we'll be good to go. Alright, I'm gonna go crank it, and it's either gonna be a happy moment or catastrophic failure, I guess. Alright, looks like a win. Looks like we're back in action. Now to get everything cleaned up, all the tools, the engine, all my look good stuff. Get ready for the next car show and meet this weekend. I think that's it. We're all patched up and good to go. Appreciate y'all hanging with me through the whole process. It's the first time I've done something like this before. So all that means is the next time it'll be a whole lot more efficient and faster when I do it. Hopefully I never have to again, but now I know. Good to go. Peace.